Welcome to the Mind of Business Success podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Cramer. Our guest today is Laurie Palau. We're going to talk about clutter and this crazy clutter business that you've created for yourself. Welcome to the show, Laurie.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, you are a fellow podcaster and you have a business that is supporting other industry professionals to grow their business. So you've sort of been there, done that, and now you're teaching others how to do the same. And I'd love to talk a little bit about those things so our listeners kind of have a frame of reference for who you are, what you do, what your business is, what you got going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it. So, yeah, I mean, the quick Cliff Notes version is I spent the better part of my career as a executive recruiter. So, working with people is something that I've always really enjoyed doing, kind of figuring out what motivates people to make change, whether it's in your career or now kind of in your home or office with clutter and organization. Um, I was at the time years ago. Basically, I called myself a single mom with a paycheck. I had a husband who traveled a ton and two small kids. And so I just developed organizing strategies to keep myself sane and functioning to be able to do all the things that I needed to do. And any of your listeners know, whether you have kids or you don't, when you are running a business and you are trying to incorporate your life and health and wellness and friendships and just keeping the house clean and organized, there's a lot of moving parts. And so certain things just came naturally to me. Certain things had to kind of be actually intentionally practiced. But I started just over the years developing these systems and strategies. And then fast forward to 2009, and I decided to take a leap of faith and say, you know what, I think I can help other people that are struggling with some of these areas, because people were just overwhelmed, and they're overwhelmed and they come home and then they're overwhelmed with the stuff at home. And I was like, it just shouldn't be that way. We just need to simplify that. And that was kind of my mission. And so I started doing that for several years. And then kind of over that time, the business grew and evolved. And like you said, I now coach and mentor other professional organizers. So I love having my hand kind of rolling up my sleeves and being in the business. But I've found that I could probably reach a greater audience through speaking in the podcast. And then I've created this network, because what was happening was people were coming to me going, well, this is great. And we love this. And we're getting inspired and all the things, but we still need this help, because sometimes, let's be honest, whatever you're outsourcing, it could be your landscaping, it could be a personal trainer, or whatever it is, we can't do it all. And despite the fact that as business owners, we want to think we can do it all, it's just not doable. And so I've created this incredible group of women. It just so happens are women. We welcome men in as well, but it just so happens we have an incredible group of women organizers all across the country that are running their businesses, looking to help people, reduce clutter and live a more organized life. So that's kind of our mission, whether we're doing it through the podcast or in person.
I love it. If we're all honest, we all feel better in a more clean, organized space. And there's a ton of psychological research that's gone into this and how clutter affects the brain and our performance and even our mood and our emotional state. So it's a serious thing. And you talked a bit about this. I want to go into this a little bit more because we do have an audience of business owners, many of which are they're managing, they're operating, they're the CEO of the company that they've built, and they're busy. They're very busy. And as we are growing our businesses, there are certain things that just simply need less of our time,
Mm-hmm.
especially as I'm a mom. I have two kids. And so household stuff, like even
Mm-hmm.
cooking and things like that, just doesn't work for me. If I go from managing my business and serving clients 5 days a week, and I've gotten very good about boundaries and me time and family time. But if I had to do all of the stuff all the time and be the full time mom and the full time homemaker and keep everything clean and organized, I'd probably lose my flipping mind. And so the service is so incredibly valuable and it's so beneficial. And I'd love to actually just take a brief moment or two and kind of come at this from that mindset perspective, because I'm sure you probably have personal firsthand experience working with clients, knowing the industry as intimately as you do, about the benefit of kind of getting in there and cleaning out all of the clutter, getting things organized and efficient in your home, in your office, wherever that may be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you hit the nail right on the head. I mean, we have this tendency to think, well, I can just add that in. I can just layer that on. And I talk about early on when I first started working with people, it was probably a naively overly simplified problem that I thought I was coming in to solve. You have a messy, disorganized space, and let's just clear out the clutter, create a nice organized system that you can easily find what you're looking for and go about your day. And the longer I did it, and the more I started really developing relationships with my clients and talking to them about the why, I started to really kind of peel back the layers, understanding that clutter is really just the symptom of something bigger. And start to find really to create language around things that people were really feeling, but were having difficult expressing: the shame, the overwhelm, the indecision, the the need to procrastinate, all of these things that they were feeling but didn't know how to put it into words. And so I started to look at clutter in kind of different categories or different buckets just to start the conversation. Because again, we have this, I think we all use the word clutter and immediately an image pops in our mind, right? Whether that's an overflowing closet, dishes in the sink, stacks of paper, whatever it is. I think that's what we all think about. But that's just a very two-dimensional definition of clutter. And really what I feel like is more harder to really what's the word I'm looking for, to diagnose, is that emotional clutter that we feel that holds us back. And it's not always sentiment. Sometimes it is like, oh, my kid made this for me and whatever. But in the business setting, because I've done a lot of talks, especially with business owners, you don't have as much sentiment, but there's, again, the indecision, the fear. We talk about like a lot of reason of paper clutter. Most people aren't emotionally attached to, you know, a bill from, or a statement. They're not emotionally attached to their American Express statement, but there's something that's holding you back from feeling that you have permission to get rid of that, whether that's fear or whatever. And so we start to kind of like look at what is behind the curtain that's driving that force. And then the other camp, in addition to your emotional clutter, is what I call calendar clutter. And I think we're guilty of this. And again, I don't mean to gender stereotype, but especially as moms, if for any of the women that are listening out there, but I know that this isn't just exclusive. So please don't send me hate mail, guys. But we feel this need that we need to be all things at all the time, or we are justifying why we're not cooking dinner, or why we're not making cupcakes for the kids thing, or why we're not doing that. And we overschedule ourselves, either intentionally or unintentionally, because we're just like, we'll figure it out. And, in my book, and I talk about this a lot, is I make this basically a visual analogy of, think of your day like a closet. And if you're constantly buying new stuff and adding new things in there, but you're never editing out, all of a sudden you're not going to be able to see what you have, find what you're looking for. And it's all just going to come crumbling down because the weight is going to be so much and you have no margin to do anything. And that's what, especially as business owner, and I mean, I see this with stay-at-home moms too. I mean, I know that's not your your demographic. But I mean, I see this with my friends who are stay-at-home moms that still feel like I need to volunteer for this and I need to do this and I need to do carpool for that. And so it doesn't have to be exclusive for the business owner, but as a woman business owner myself, it's a slippery slope that I have had to work very intentionally to set those boundaries, create that margin. And it's like easier said than done, right? Because you want to do a lot of these things. And as business owners, we're leaders by nature for the most part. We are not necessarily afraid of, putting ourselves out there or pushing ourselves outside of a comfort zone. So like all of those things come naturally to us, which is why we do what we do. The flip side to that is we can get ourselves into a point where we are just exhausted and depleted. And then what happens? The low hanging fruit suffers. And then that's the stuff that's your laundry and that's your to-do list. And that's all of these things that feed the machine of your house or even your office. And then you never feel like you always feel like you're playing catch up because you're never quite there. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Now, I am usually working people, from the mindset side of stuff. So we're working
Mhm.
on kind of doing the mental, emotional cleanup work first. And over the many years that I've been working with my clients, organization frequently comes up.
Mhm.
I want to be more organized. I need to be more organized. I keep procrastinating on this. I feel so overwhelmed about that. And what I've found is so fascinating is I'm always working on the inner work first, right? You've got to get your foundation right. But in a lot of instances, that is going to involve taking some action. And
Totally.
and they so go hand in hand because if you can get your mindset right enough to organize one closet or even one drawer,
Mhm.
you are now reinforcing in your subconscious mind, I've got this. And there is a psychological, emotional purging that begins to occur as we are actually going through that physical process of releasing. And I love that. And metaphorically, it's just so entangled.
Mhm.
Um, so, one of the things I want to make sure we do, because obviously I'm going to highly recommend that anybody who needs assistance with that reach out to somebody like yourself who has this huge network of individuals that can help with this. But for those listening who maybe are at a point where they're like, can you just give me one tip or something
Oh,
that
yeah.
I can do right now to clean up some clutter or to feel a little bit more organized? Do you have something?
Absolutely. And this is like one of my favorite questions because I think it's important that they do go hand in hand. And I love what you said. And especially a lot of people are visual people and the motivation, it's like, I, I always make the analogy, like I'm always trying to lose weight and get more fit. And you can do all the things, but sometimes you just want to see like, I'm like, if I could just see what it would look like. Give me a visual of like, if you do this for this amount of time consistently, this is what you're going to look like. Because when we start like the rubber meets the road and you start picking up that traction, that's what motivates you to keep doing more. So I love what you said about just starting with small, like a drawer or, just a shelf or whatnot. Because I always say that to people, action does not have to be epic. As a matter of fact, we want people to start small. You don't just get up one day and say, I'm going to run a marathon and you've never run before. You're going to start by walking, then you're going to start by jogging, then you're going to eventually work up to a 5K. So it's all incremental steps and organizing is no different. I'm sure you talk about that with your mindset. But I think again, people need the motivation, but they also need the tactical action steps. So I'm going to walk them through for anybody out there, your DIYers, where can I start today? So again, I use this very simple method. I call it my ESP method. It stands for empty, sort, purge. And I can tell you, I've tested this with my kids. I teach this to children. So it's a very simple method. And the beauty of it is this method can be applied to any space in your home or office. Anything with physical clutter, you can apply this to. So Your empty store purge is you're going to first empty the space. And again, people think that they're like, oh my gosh, I have to empty my entire garage at once. No, we're talking about empty the shelf, empty the drawer, empty the bin, whatever it is. So again, if you're doing your home office, just take the top of your desk or just take one drawer at a time. You're going to empty that out. We do that for two reasons. First reason is it's easier to be intentional about what you want to put in than making those decisions of picking things out one by one. So once you make that clean sweep, it gives you that white space, that blank slate to look at. So that's what I always recommend. And then the other reason is, again, once it's out there, it's a lot it's a lot more challenging to just walk away. Sure, people can do it. But, if you're like, I'm just going to do a couple things and then it's easier to just shut the drawer. But once you're like, okay, I just dumped this drawer onto the floor, most people don't want to leave it there. So it's kind of that forced committal to like at least see that drawer through. So that's, giving you that boundary. And then here's where the sorting comes in. And this is really where the major kind of transformation part of it comes in. So people will sort, like, okay, what do I do with this now? So what I do is I use this 4-pile method. Again, use it in every space of the house. Pile number one, keep. And keep means I'm keeping it in this space. So this is a pen and post-it notes and a stapler, and I need that to live in my drawer. Period, full stop. I have a Nerf gun that's in my drawer because my kids came running in and they were fighting in the middle of my conference call. So I grabbed it away and shoved it in the drawer. No, we're not keeping that there. So keep means we're keeping it in that spot. Then you've got your donate, which again, home office, maybe you're getting rid of, maybe you have 3 staplers and you're donating them. Maybe you're getting rid of an old copy machine. Probably not as much to donate. But again, if you're talking about other spaces in your house, you have your donate pile. Then you've got your recycle pile, which is our, environmentally friendly way of saying your trash pile. So anything that's going, anything that's damaged, broken, not good enough to pay it forward, it's going in the trash, right? Get rid of it. And then your 4th pile is the one that most people don't talk about. And I think it's really one of the most important ones is what I call the relocate pile. That's the Nerf gun, although you might want to throw the Nerf gun. That is, we want to keep it, but this is not the right home for it. I think it's overplayed that every place needs a home. I mean, there is truth to that, but that's where that indecision for a lot of spaces, people don't know where the home is. So that just kind of becomes this dumping ground because I don't know what to do with it. So I'm just going to leave it here, wherever here is. Or something like I was in the middle of doing something and I grabbed it and I just didn't put it back in its proper place. And over time, that just kind of accumulates because let's be honest, like life happens. So that relocate pile, and this is just a sidebar. I know this is more of a business mindset, but in personal life, this is a great thing where our memorabilia comes in when I talk a lot about keepsakes, where people will have things that they want to hold on to, whether it's for themselves or for their kids or something that somebody gave to them that they're like, I have my kids, baptism dress hanging in their closet, but they're 8 years old. And it's like, okay, well, that doesn't need to be taking up space in the closet. We need to just put it in a memory bin. So that relocate pile a lot of times frees up so much physical space because you're like, oh, now I know that this is going somewhere else. So
Love
once
it.
you go through that 4-step process, those 4 piles, your actual key pile should theoretically be a fraction of what it started with, which makes it so much more manageable to then organize it. And then you're going to just kind of like, I corral things. So I always put like with like, I'm a big drawer divider person and, just so that you can find things because the greatest tip, and then the P, obviously the ESP we talked about, the P is the purging, which is the actual process of going through the 4 piles. And what the one takeaway, if you take away nothing else from my conversation, is I want you to think about the ease of retrieval. So this is the biggest thing. When most people think about organizing, they think about putting something away. How can I put it away? Where can I put it? And I almost want to flip the script because as important as it is to put stuff away, it's more important to be able to know where stuff is when you need it. Because, and this is especially true in business, if you're talking about filing stuff, whether it's digital files, which is a whole other animal, but digital or physical or whatever, you want to be able to retrieve it. The whole purpose of organizing isn't to put stuff away. It's to know where you can find it when you need it. And so as you're developing your organizing system, once you've gone through the editing process, which is like my ESP, once you've gone through the editing and you're like, here's what I'm left with, the question becomes, what is the best way for, how am I going to know where to go to look for this? How am I going to find this? And that is the one thing that people are like so quick to put it away. And I always say, let's put to, you know, let's think about how we can, retrieve it later.
So good. All right. That was gold right there.
Okay.
So everybody better roll up their sleeves and make it a point. There's everybody's probably got at least one area where they could use a little bit of decluttering and organizing.
Yeah, and I think again, what I try to do is we all have so many things that require real like mental bandwidth, decision fatigue, all of the things that we all have, kind of on our plates. This should not be one of them. So I have legitimately oversimplified my whole decluttering and organizing process to make it so that it's transferable from space to space, residential and work. And you can really apply it everywhere. And I think knowing that there's steps to follow make it easier for me, because then I'm not in my head asking myself questions like, okay, it just becomes a tactical execution.
Yeah, that's hugely important, because one of the reasons that people don't follow through is they get overwhelmed by the details.
Yep. Absolutely.
So I know we don't have a lot of time left, and I want to make sure that you are directing our listeners to your podcast so they can tune in and check that out, as well as to your website, because you did mention that they can be connected with support, people who can help, professionals within your network. So can you share those with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best place for people to connect up with me, the hub for everything, is my website, which is simply the letter B like boy organized.com, simplybeorganized.com. From there, you can connect up to my show, my podcast, which is this Organized Life podcast. And we also, if you're an entrepreneur listening to this show, you're probably going to like my show, because we do a lot of weaving of being organized in the entrepreneurial space. So a lot of crossover there. And then from there, you can also connect up with any of they're called our SBO partners, and they are endorsed and trained by us, coached, mentored. The beauty of it is they're all over the country. So if you don't see someone in your neck of the woods, reach out to us. But we've got a vast network of those hands-on people. So if you're like, this is great, but I still feel bottlenecked, or I have too much on my plate and this is something I need to delegate or outsource, please reach out to any of our trusted experts, and they will happily come and help you with any of the areas that you are struggling.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Laurie, for being with us and sharing some really, really good tips. I loved it. I learned a couple of things myself.
Great.
And of course, thank you to all of our listeners. We're doing this for you. If you haven't already subscribed, make sure you do so. And until next time, we will see you in the next episode.